Walking in Carlisle on an early fall day, you step out of the woods and see what at first glance is a really wide and beautiful marshland. It's not. You have just arrived at Carlisle's only cranberry bog. Cranberry bogs used to be prevalent in this area as elsewhere in eastern Massachusetts, but they are very few and far between now. Almost all of them are exhibition bogs, designed to remind people like us that once there was another form of agriculture in Massachusetts. This project is a joint venture between the Conservation Commissions of Carlisle and Chelmsford and the farmer who maintains the bogs and harvests their berries every fall. Earlier times probably saw native berries growing in Tophet Island Swamp, but the big time began when the Nichols family decided to supplement their area farm by developing a commercial bog. By 1903, they had prepared the land and built a bog house. 30 years later, this aerial photo shows how thoroughly the Nichols Cranberry Company transformed a swamp into holding ponds with dams and the cultivated bogland we see today. Our trek through time today will take us across the dikes between the bogs, past the bog house that was built as a place to store their supplies, to store their cranberries, to put up the temporary harvest workers, and then during the winter to store squash until it was hardened off and could be sold. 3 fruits, they say, are native to North America: grapes, blueberries, and cranberries. The grapes in this bog seem to be very happy with where they've found a place and climb all over the bramble that is rapidly spreading toward the path. No sign of blueberries right here, but out beyond lie acres of cranberry bog. A cranberry bog on a fall day is quintessential New England. It's the home to many migrating birds, and it's a favorite place to visit for those to whom a cranberry bog is nostalgic and represents natural New England at its finest. This interpretive sign is one of a number around the bog area. You can basically learn the history and the culture of cranberrying by reading these signs. It's not easy to maintain a cranberry bog. It's one thing to have some pickerelweed growing in the ditches, but pickerelweed begets more pickerelweed. And the other plants along the edges, the Joe Pye weed, the asters, the milkweed, quickly fill in the ditches if they're not rigorously kept under control. Likewise, the beds themselves need to be replenished almost every year with a new layer of sand, partly to encourage the fuller growth of the cranberry plants, and partly to discourage the other grasses and weeds that enjoy the same environment. The soil, the peat-like, tends to be low in oxygen and therefore discouraging of many plants. But cranberries are the exception, which is one of the reasons they used to be found growing wild in so many places in New England that, according to colonial farmers, weren't good for much else. The characteristic spiky stems of the cranberry plants are so easily identifiable, making it so clear that it's a cranberry bog, that it takes a minute to realize we're not seeing the cranberries, except in one small place. These are big berries. No problem with them at all. We're standing on a dike here that holds back the irrigation pond on one side and keeps it from flooding the bog on the other side before it's time. It seems to be a symbolic track between nature and nurture, although I guess one has to remind yourselves that nature wouldn't be here in this form without man's creation of the bog and the dam to start with. It's a foggy morning a week later. The The bogs are brown. Not much sign of life right now until you look a little closer. The signs are up. The warning flags have been put in so that the harvester doesn't run over the sprinkler system. And the prehistoric looking conveyor is waiting for its chance. The geese who sounded so disturbed a couple days ago now know why they were so disturbed. They're floating on top of a bog now instead of in the nice, peaceful holding pond they thought they could call home. 2 days later, it's a sunny, windy, mid-fall day, and they're harvesting. And now they're making the corral smaller. Kind of like netting fish, but redder. Oh, and vegetarian. Mark and the harvester head off to the other side of the bog. Probably to drag in some of the escaping cranberries. And the conveyor still spews water as more cranberries go into the truck that already looked full, but they found more space. The trail goes on here, up past the lower pond dam, to meet up with the stream and the ponds in a less busy environment. We saved that to explore in a different season, but what we found was a different world. Cranberry harvest isn't the only time to come to this place. Although it may be the most spectacular, the colors in late spring are more subtle than in the fall, but there's a range of greens here. And you have more of a sense of this as a wild place than a cultured one. That is just neat. This must be a good dog smell day. And the woods are full of the songs of birds who have set up families, have just had new babies, and are happy with the world in general. Man and beaver have distinctly different ideas of what's appropriate to do near a body of water. If you're a beaver, for instance, the sign of an outlet is a sign of danger. So a lot of time is spent trying to fill it up and block the flow. So far, as you see, he hasn't been successful, but not for want of trying. The pile of twigs and grasses heaped next to the drain are man's attempt to clear what beaver has carefully tried to block. This is an ongoing process. Neither one is ready to give up on it. I'm pretty sure these dents in the dam, scooped out places, are crossovers for critters, muskrats, beaver, and probably others as well as a drinking place for those who are more landlocked. If you turn to the other side, you will see that the beaver had something very specific in mind. Not this year, maybe the previous season. gnawing his way halfway around the trunk. He probably did it more to eat the bark than he did to try to knock the tree down and build a dam. But since it's so close to that drain he was trying to block, it's hard to tell. Clearly this tree was used only for food. It was carefully hewn off its base and then systematically stripped of its bark, 2/3 at least of the way to its end. Next to it is one of the mounds of swamp muck that had been pulled out to check out for potential food there as well. Once over the dam, we enter a wooded peninsula that separates upper and lower bog ponds. The floor is carpeted with Canada mayflowers, delicate little starflowers, and a floral treat for this afternoon, the first lady slippers just come into bloom. There are shady, peaceful groves of pine to go walking through on this extended track, and spotlit corners. And lo and behold, there we find the blueberry bushes that we didn't find in and around the bog. Not high bush ones that we might have found there, but the low bush berries that grow in openings caused by fire or winter blowdown. A gas line with an airplane overhead provides an unexpected practical link to our trails. But the pipeline itself is a wonderful trail and is maintained in a rare environment of low bushes and ground covers that is especially appreciated by a lot of small critters who like the edges. The Chelmsford Trail, meandering through pine woods, blueberry bushes in the woods, the requisite stone wall that shows up in any forestscape in New England, even a cellar hole directly in front of us, a little hard to identify. A bit further, it's clear that this is the head of the marsh that we saw near the dam down below. The sun that sneaks in between the pine boughs spotlights a beautifully rich, flowering high bush blueberry. They are here, after all. This track leads out to a peninsula, at the end of which is one of Chelmsford's conservation ponds. Swans rest on the far side of the pond. Cow lilies are in bud in the center. It's not a big place. You can hear lawnmowers in the distance, or airplanes overhead. But this swath of land shared between Carlisle and Chelmsford is the rural equivalent of an urban pocket park. It's a sanctuary for a wide range of flora and fauna. It's a place to come to walk, to exercise your dog, or just a quiet place to sit and enjoy what life has to offer in the spring.